A beautiful region of Israel, the place where Jesus performed many miracles and revealed important truths, hometowns to many of the first disciples. This week we travel to the fresh waters of the Sea of Galilee. Welcome to the Shalom Y'all Ministries podcast. I'm your co-host, Adam Keim, along with my fellow Israel explorer, Dr. Daniel McCabe. Daniel, how you doing?
Fellow Israel explorer. I love the way you put that. That is great. I'm doing well. I got the 2 teenage boys and my 8-year-old that are keeping me busy. But yes, I'm doing very well. Thank you.
Amen. Good. The ministry, of course, our mission of Shalom Y'all is to teach and encourage those who love the Bible, the land of the Bible, and the people of the land. In addition to all that we do, typically stateside, we also lead educational tours to Israel. Have you ever dreamed about visiting the promised land yourself? It can happen. Reach out to us for more information on how you or your group can experience the land of Israel firsthand. Every episode of the podcast, we begin by featuring a random topic, which may or may not be connected to the main subject. Now, this could be from the world of geography, theology, or anything related somehow to the Bible and or to the land of Israel itself. Daniel, what do you have for us today?
Adam, you and I are a long ways from 25 now. Do you remember those days? What were you doing when you were 25?
I think that the car was just invented, the automobile. So I was learning. No, it wasn't as long ago for me, but
Well, that's what my kids tell me.
Yeah, of course. I do remember pretty much every year of my life pretty well. I like to remember what job did I have, where did I live, and then from there I can kind of like fill in the memory gaps.
Yeah, for me, I think I was just finishing up my engineering career, was feeling the call to ministry at 25 and enrolled in seminary that year. So that seems like a long time ago for me. Obviously, I've got a few more years than you do. So my math doesn't work as well as you do. I can't always remember what I was doing in any particular year, but we are still, nevertheless, both of us a long ways from 25. But thankfully, and this is meaning more and more to me every year, that there are many good men coming behind us, including, Lord willing, my 3 boys. And
that's right.
And I'm proud of them already for how they're standing for the Lord. Well, I stumbled across these words this week from 2 Chronicles. You can wipe off the dust of 2 Chronicles in your Bible like I had to. 2 Chronicles 27, 1 through 2. It says, Jotham was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 16 years in Jerusalem. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord. You probably know the names David, Hezekiah, Josiah. All 3 were good kings of Judah. But most people may not remember or know the name Jotham, yet the Bible speaks very highly of him. I like to call Jotham the acorn king. Because he grew into a mighty oak. Perhaps you've heard the saying that mighty oaks from little acorns grow. And that is very true, but not all acorns grow into mighty oaks. Some acorns don't survive the cold temperatures and icy winds of winter. Some rot prematurely from disease. Some ripen too late to reproduce. Some are eaten by squirrels, pigs, and the beautiful blue jays out my office window here, or crushed underfoot by passing men. And the story of King Jotham, though, is about one acorn that did survive. His story in the Bible will challenge you to grow strong in the Lord, but his story will also serve as a warning to us that there are people and circumstances that threaten your growth in the Lord. I wish I could tell you the entire story today. We'll have to do an episode on that maybe sometime, but let me at least share 10 pointers to stay strong all your days. Really quickly. Number 1, talk to the Lord every day. What are you doing with your time that could be more important than that? Talk to him. Number 2, forgive others readily. Teach your children, tell yourself, Share with anybody that you have opportunity how important this is, because if you don't, you'll grow bitter with age. Forgive others readily. Thirdly, reproduce yourself in others. Teach others the things that God has taught you. However way you can do that, just casually or formally, discipleship, whatever, but reproduce yourself in others. 4, view everything you do as an offering to God, because it is. 5th, guard against the love of money, or it will enslave you. 6, thank God routinely. Thank Him right now, even though you may hurt. 7, treat your family with love and understanding. You only get one. 8, pursue humility, otherwise you will fall hard. Number 9, flee sexual immorality. That's a timely word for men and women of any age. And then number 10, take God's word seriously. Seek the deep things of God. Mighty oaks from little acorns grow. Please be one that does.
Those are great words, and all of those resonate with me, Daniel. Thank you for those thoughts. I love them all, especially that final one. Take God's word seriously. Know God through the scriptures. If we do that, all those other ones I think kind of flow from that, don't we? If we learn who God is from the word that He's revealed to us, then we actually can go about taking those other ones seriously.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Now, I'd like to share with you a travel experience to the Sea of Galilee by talking about Mount Arbel. You know, not a lot of people have even heard of Mount Arbel before.
Even people that traveled to Israel.
Yeah, a lot of people miss it. But it sits on the western shore of the sea. It's a very large hill. Now, I've mentioned this several times in our Facebook posts, Daniel, but mountains in Israel are just very large hills, nothing like what we see in the Rockies or anything like that. You know, somebody from Colorado would not think that there are any mountains anywhere in Israel.
Yes.
The only, I guess, real mountain as we would think of them is probably Mount Hermon in the northeast. But anyway, Arbel's Ridge is very prominent in the western skyline of the Sea of Galilee. It was a major landmark for ancient travelers as far back in history as you can go, usually when they would be heading toward Egypt or back. But it was a notable feature that would help guide people along that route. From the top of Arbel, which you can access very easily today, you can just drive up to the parking lot up there, walk a short distance, and overlook the surrounding area from the top of the mountain. You can see all of the Sea of Galilee on a clear day, all the way across the whole lake, about 7 miles west to east and about 13 miles north to south. Now, you will be perched atop the city of Tiberias, the town of Magdala, and you can look down to see regions like the plain of Gennesaret and others. And you can climb down the cliffside. It looks very treacherous, but they've put some nice handholds and stuff in there. You still got to be pretty mobile, but it's not as dangerous as it might look.
Well, that's what I want to do. I want to climb down the cliffside.
Yeah, it is fun. I've been there when elderly ladies have made the descent down, and very, very pregnant ladies, and it's very doable. But it's a lot of fun. So you can climb down the cliffside, and on your way down the descent, you can explore caves that were used by Jewish rebels against the Romans and crusaders about 1,000 years ago. But whatever you do, be sure at the end of your hike down to stop at the little ice cream store that a sweet Arab woman always has open and waiting for you.
Well, that's definitely what I want to do. Do they have like dilly bars and things like that, or what do they have?
Probably not the brand name, or it might be Dully bars or something. You know, they have things like that. It's not a full blown fresh ice cream and stuff. It's popsicles and things on a stick. But it's really cool because you've just descended Mount Arbel, and off to your left you see the Arbel Pass, which no doubt Jesus took many times as he went south or came back to the Galilean region from Jerusalem. But that Arab woman is there ready to sell you ice cream, and it's just a fun little time. Now, Daniel, what is this week's trivia question?
All right. Well, Adam, I know you've only lived in Texas about 3 years, whereas I grew up there. But do you know what the highest point in Texas is, what it is, where it is?
I think it's not Stephenville.
No, it's not where you're at. It's quite a bit west. It's Guadalupe Peak. That's about 100 miles or so east of El Paso. Still a good distance west of where you're at there in Stephenville. And Guadalupe Peak is 8,751 feet. That's pretty high.
Yeah.
Now, before Texas, I wouldn't have expected necessarily for you to know about Guadalupe Peak, but before Texas, you lived in Minnesota all your life, right? All your
I
life?
did.
Okay.
Yep.
So perhaps, do you know the highest point or peak in Minnesota?
It may have been a place I've been to. I can't remember the specific name of it, but I did somewhere along the North Shore, which is in the northeastern part of the state. You can
Okay.
take a nice hike up again a large hill. There's no mountains in Minnesota, and I think I remember learning after the fact that that's the highest point in Minnesota, but I forget the
Okay.
name of it.
Okay, well, I'll tell you the name because you've got the locations in the far northeast corner of the state, and it's called Eagle Mountain.
Mountain.
Yep, Eagle Mountain. It's okay. The elevation is 2,301 feet.
Well, do they have a base camp there?
I don't know. We'll have to explore. We are explorers. You've mentioned that. But so 2,301 feet, not quite as high as Guadalupe Peak in Texas at 8,751 feet. But the highest point in Israel is even higher than Guadalupe Peak in Texas. And Israel also boasts the lowest place on earth. Now, and that is just amazing to me. Such a high elevation and the very lowest elevation in such a small country. So today, a little geography quiz. I know that's your strength. So I'm going to list 5 places in Israel in alphabetical order, so I don't influence anybody. And I want you and our listeners to put on their thinking caps and do their best to put them in correct order of elevation from lowest elevation to highest elevation. And if you can write them down, that might help. There's only 5. Hopefully you can get them. But here they are. Again, they're in alphabetical order, so I want you to mix them back correctly and put them from lowest to highest elevation. So number 1, the Dead Sea. 2 is Mount Hermon. 3 is the Mount of Olives. 4th is Nazareth. And 5th is Tel Aviv. So here they are again, the Dead Sea, Mount Hermon, the Mount of Olives, Nazareth, and Tel Aviv. Now, I think this is a pretty hard question for most of us. Adam, I know you're pretty good at it, so I'll have to quiz you here later when I give you the answer, but I bet some of our listeners can get it. In any event, we'll have the answer for you later in the podcast.
The Sea of Galilee is a unique place in Israel that might surprise a lot of people who visit. Now, in our modern world, you might assume that the whole area would be built up for tourists and you wouldn't really get a sense of the ancient land, but that's not at all the case. Today, you can see for yourself much the same that Jesus saw when he ministered there about 2,000 years ago. Now, Jesus used the Galilee region as his home base of operations during his public ministry, as described in the Gospels. He moved his family there to Capernaum, probably shortly after Joseph died, but we can't be too sure of the timeline there of Joseph's death. But in Mark 1, verses 35 to 39, we read this. And rising very early in the morning, while it was still dark, he departed and went out to a desolate place. Daniel, this is probably a place much like Mount Arbel. And there he prayed. And Simon and those who were with him searched for him, and they found him and said to him, "Everyone is looking for you." And he said to them, "Let us go on to the next towns, that I may preach there also, for that is why I came out." And he went throughout all Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and casting out demons. Now, a big part of what makes the Sea of Galilee so special is that Jesus ministered throughout that region all the time. So much so, in fact, that if you think about it, I mean, there would have been virtually no sickness or even death for those who bothered to see him. We see that in the Gospels so clearly. And Capernaum, his hometown, was an intentional location. It's because the Old Testament strategy of evangelism, as God designed it, was to stay home in the promised land and testify to the world as its peoples traveled through. Earlier I talked about, the international traffic coming by Mount Arbel. It's only later that we received the strategy of going out into all the world in Acts 1:8 after the Lord's resurrection. But the land of Israel, it sat at the very intersection of global travel in the ancient world. Jesus lived in an Old Testament context, and his mission was the same. Capernaum was a major Herodian tax hub, since it was still along the major travel route. The tales of Jesus and his ministry would be carried far and wide by those passing through. It's largely how he became so famous and popular so quickly. Now, if you visit an ancient synagogue site or an old location of a Galilean town, you can rest assured that you are standing where Jesus stood, walking where he walked, or even sailing where he walked if you take one of the boats across the lake, like you talked about in one of our recent podcasts, Daniel.
Oh, that was clever. Sailing where he walked. I love that.
Oh, yeah. You can sail where he walked. You can swim where he walked. You can, like me, lose a wristwatch in the Sea of Galilee where he walked.
Oh, no.
I'm not bitter at that. You can get better or bitter. And your warning to us earlier was to not grow bitter. I'm not bitter about losing my wristwatch in the Sea of Galilee.
Good to know that.
7 years ago. I lost a lot of time there, metaphorically and literally.
Oh, another one. Okay.
Anyway, yes. But this reality that, Jesus preached everywhere and healed so many people, it makes it extra heartbreaking when we see the Lord declare in Luke 10:13-16, "Woe to you, Chorazin! Woe to you, Bethsaida! For if the mighty works done in you had been done in Tyre and Sidon," these foreign cities in Lebanon, "they would have repented long ago, sitting in sackcloth and ashes. They would have been mournful over their sin." He continues, "But it will be more bearable in the judgment for Tyre and Sidon than for you. And you, Capernaum, will you be exalted to heaven? You shall be brought down to Hades. The one who hears you hears me, and the one who rejects you rejects me. And the one who rejects me rejects him who sent me." Those are Galilean cities, Chorazin, Bethsaida, Capernaum. And there the people saw a countless many miracles by Jesus. Now, the modern skeptic thinks that Jesus was just able to fool these ancient people with magic tricks. Not at all. I mean, these people knew very intimately what sickness and death were, more than we do. And the things that Jesus accomplished, they didn't just happen. They were bona fide miracles, and the people realized that. But many of them did not believe, even though God shined the brightest light in human history in that area. But we can take comfort today, because Jesus also said to Thomas in John 20:29, "Have you believed because you've seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed." And that can be us.
Adam, when planning for this Sea of Galilee podcast, I had it narrowed down initially to 3 topics that I thought our listeners might enjoy. But then I kind of go back to my seminary days, and I remember thinking when I was learning to preach and teach that I'll never be able to fill 20 minutes of anything. It's just going to be too hard. And now it's gotten to the point where I'm like, I've got way too much information to share of things that the Lord has shown me through the years. So it's the same thing here today. I had these 3 topics, but I really couldn't decide which of the 3 topics that I should share, which, like I said, seems to happen to me a lot. So I decided I'm going to touch on all 3 of them. How's that?
I like that plan. Every podcast episode, we'll title it something like, Bethlehem or the Dead Sea. And after we record every one of them, I always think, oh, we could have said that. We could have said that. We could have done that. And, our listeners might come across one of them and maybe not hear what they were expecting to hear. Our podcast episodes are about 25 minutes. We could talk for days on pretty much any one of these topics. So yeah, let's hear what you got.
Okay. Well, first, As a little boy, I remember first hearing the story of Jesus' disciples saw the flannel graph where they're furiously rowing their boat in the middle of a storm on the Sea of Galilee. How they thought that they saw a ghost that was actually Jesus, and then how he calmed the storm with a word. Well, there's that part in there about Peter walking on the water with him too. But it wasn't until later that I learned that storms on the lake are quite common. And here's why. The lake is surrounded almost entirely by mountains, or as you call them, large hills, and that's fair. But there's one even larger mountain that you mentioned to the north, Mount Hermon, that reaches to an altitude of more than 9,000 feet. Well, cold air from that mountain and the slowly ascending hills that work their way north from the Sea of Galilee up to the base of Mount Hermon. This cold air, it finds its way through narrow ravines and valleys. It heads south, and through these ravines and valleys that open on the Sea of Galilee, this cold air at times hits the northern shore of the lake, with just an unexpected ferocity at times. Now, since the surface of the lake itself, the Sea of Galilee, it's approximately 700 feet below sea level, and the surrounding atmosphere of the Sea of Galilee, therefore, is very warm and tropical. The cold northern air and the lake's warm air will often just ignite these tremendous storms with little or no warning, and that's why we can tell the story of Peter walking on the water to Jesus. Second, in 2018, the Israeli government approved a plan to pump desalinated water into the Sea of Galilee in order to stabilize the water level of the lake. At times in its history, the lake has flooded homes and businesses on its shoreline, while at other times during droughts, the lake's level has plunged to dangerous lows that threaten the ecology of the lake. But now, when lake levels are low, water can be pumped into it. And when lake levels are high, water can be released into a canal that empties into the Jordan River at the southern outlet of the lake. Major fluctuations in the lake now they're virtually a thing of the past. That's at least since 2018. It's a new thing, but it's working very well. So that the levels vary between about 703 feet below sea level at its lowest to 685 feet below sea level at its highest. But whatever its level, the Sea of Galilee remains the lowest freshwater lake in elevation in the world. I don't know if most people know that. And the second lowest lake in the world, second only to what lake, Adam?
The Dead Sea.
Yep, the salty waters of the Dead Sea, not far to its south. And if you ask me, the Sea of Galilee is just one of the most beautiful lakes in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Thirdly, have you ever heard about the Jesus boat? Do you know that boat, Adam?
I've visited it a few times.
Okay, yeah, it's definitely worth visiting for sure. And folks that make it to Galilee, give it your best effort to go visit it. It was discovered in 1986 on the northwestern shore of the sea, when the water level at one point dropped very low. And this boat that they have discovered, it probably dates to the late 1st century BC or the early 1st century AD. They know that based on nails found in the boat and also from an examination of the hull's construction techniques. So we know that. Scientists in 1986, they successfully removed the boat from the mud that had actually fortunately minimized its decay over the millennium. And that process took about 12 days. And then they cleaned it, submerged it in wax for 12 years to prevent any future decay. And they have prepared it for display at a museum very near where it was first discovered, having been discovered by two brothers who were fishermen as well as amateur archaeologists. As you mentioned earlier, the width of the boat was 7.5 feet wide and a little over 4 feet in height, and the boat measures 27 feet long. It accommodated 4 rowers, as best as we can tell, and at least 10 to 15 more people could have squeezed in there as well. Could this have been the disciples' boat? Well, certainly it could have. But without any evidence, we're left to say only that it is of the type used by Peter, Andrew, James, and John for fishing, and additionally for transportation from one side of the lake to another. But we'll just call it the Jesus boat. They do, or sometimes the Galilee boat. But in any event, what a find. That was an amazing discovery in 1986, and you can go see it today. All right, it's now time for the answer to our trivia question. I gave you 5 places in Israel and asked you to list them from lowest elevation to highest elevation. Okay, now get ready, Adam. I'm going to quiz you here. So here they are again in alphabetical order. Number 1, the Dead Sea, then Mount Hermon, the Mount of Olives, Nazareth, and then Tel Aviv. Adam, what do you think? You think you can put them in order?
I do know these. Like you said, geography, I know it fairly well.
Okay.
And all of these pop into my mind of where they are on the map, how high they are and stuff. And some clues have been given throughout this podcast episode.
Yes.
Some of these. But if you want me to put them in order, I can for you.
All right, let's do it.
The lowest one is the Dead Sea.
All right,
that
check.
is the lowest point on the surface of the earth.
Okay, about 1,400 feet below sea level.
Yep. Now the numbers I probably wouldn't be able to give you.
I'll give them to you.
Exactly.
You get the order and I'll give you the numbers.
The next lowest of all of these would be Tel Aviv.
Okay.
That's right on the coast. So that's sea level, basically.
16 feet, it will say online. Yep.
All right. The next one, we're getting up higher in elevation now, will be Nazareth.
Yes. Okay. 1,138 feet.
Yep. That's perched just on the north side of the Valley of Jezreel on the Nazareth Ridge. So that won't be quite as high as the next one, the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem.
Which is 2,710 feet. So you are on a roll here.
All right. And of course, Jerusalem is one of the higher elevated places in all of Israel. But the highest one, which there's a ski resort at the top of this place. Probably in the similar area where maybe Jesus was transfigured in front of his disciples. So if you ever ski up there, you might be swooshing down past the point where, the disciples saw Elijah and Moses. That's Mount Hermon.
Yes, at 9,232 feet. The Dead Sea, Tel Aviv, Nazareth, Mount of Olives, and then finally Mount Hermon. Very good. I bet our listeners got it as well. Hopefully they did.
I bet they did.
Well, Shalom is an acronym that helps explain what our ministry is all about, and that's why we included in the title of our ministry, Shalom Y'all Ministries. The L in Shalom stands for life in the land of Israel. We teach, for example, on the people, the songs, the traditions, the food, and the languages of Israel, for example. This week we'll answer the question, what is a Messianic Jew? And next week, we'll introduce you to the song Hava Nagila. These are all life in the land kinds of topics. The Bible tells us that we are blessed when we show kindness and interest in the Jewish people. So we love to explore that. And the Bible tells us, too, that we should pray for the peace of Israel, for Jerusalem. And so we love to explore life in the land of Israel. We invite you to join us on Facebook at Shalom Y'all Ministries, where we post daily about the topics from our acronym, beginning with the scriptures, S, the history and geography of Israel, H, the archaeology of the Bible, A, life in the land of Israel, L, on the ground tours, O, and helpful media and resources, M, S, HALOM, the word peace or hello in Hebrew. If you don't do Facebook, that's okay. Just request our weekly email version of all that we've written each week. The weekly comes out every Saturday at 1 p.m. CST, and there's a lot in each edition. You can sign up to receive it at our website, which is shalomyallministries.org. shalomyallministries.org, no apostrophes, no spaces, or just send us an email at shalomyallministries@gmail.com.
Thank you so much for joining us on the Shalom Y'all Ministries podcast. We hope you enjoyed this look into the wonderful region that is the Sea of Galilee. Remember, most of all, what Jesus did and taught there, not only for the benefit of its people in his time, but for us as well. Shalom, y'all.
Shalom, y'all.